We're very happy to have Matthew Hornor, the president and CEO of Maple Gold Mines, and Fred Speidel, the VP Exploration. We had the company in August of 2017 at our program as under the name Arvista. They rebranded as Maple Gold Mines. They've got more than that 2.8 million ounces, but haven't had time to calculate yet. And I'm looking forward to hearing all the progress. Please.
Good morning, John. Good morning, everybody on the line. Fred, nice to see you. Today we'll talk about what's happened since 2017, since we were at John's conference. Some of the recent accomplishments of the company in forming the partnership, of course, with Agnico and others. If you go to the next slide, please, Fred. I think the investment highlights is where I'd like to kick things off, because in a sea of junior mining gold companies and other companies, it's often difficult for anyone to approach any company or any opportunity. And I think these are some of the core points that I think people should consider prior to jumping in and taking a position or getting involved. Location is one. We're located in Quebec, and the Quebec's Abitibi Greenstone Belt, which is a crazy prolific for gold area. Over 200 million ounces produced so far in that region. So location is very important, of course, for any decision around a company and whether to invest in it or not. You know, who are you partnered with? Well, you know, who is the company partnered with? Well, we are partnered with Agnico Eagle Mines. They're a strategic 50-50. They contributed to project, and we now have 2 projects to work on, and we'll talk about that shortly. But that's very important. Who's giving you a sign of confidence and shown the market that the probability of things going forward is definitely there. Whether the company you're looking at has an established resource or not, that's very important, and we do. As John mentioned, a lot of things have happened since 2017 when I initially took over the helm and started changing a lot of things inside the company. We can talk about that. Is there upside potential in the existing resource package or the land package? Well, we believe targeting the next multi-million ounce Canadian gold camp. We want to be one of the most significant gold companies in Canada. This is how all of them started: Goldcorp, Agnico Eagle, others, with a core project that really takes off. So that's our intention. How's the company financed? Well, we are very well financed. We have around $40 million in cash and committed JV funding. In addition to that, there's warrants on our company from Agnico primarily, and some tradable warrants that give us an all-in cash position of around 60 million plus. So there's no concern about our cash position moving forward, and that's something really to take into consideration looking at any company. And then you look at the software, the personnel of a company. I think that's one of the most important things. Have the management team been in this situation before? Have they brought companies forward? Have they financed effectively? Have they made discoveries and brought projects into production, or partnered to give their shareholders and investors a sizable return on their original investment? Have they given them an exit or some way to realize on their investment? So these are the main investment highlights that I'll go over, and then Fred will talk about the project and the targeting we're doing right now on different areas of our both projects within our joint venture with Agnico. Next, please. So why is Quebec so great? Well, I'll spend a few minutes here talking about this. Quebec is one of the top mining jurisdictions globally. I think it is in the top 3 actually, having worked pretty much everywhere that most miners have worked. In my prior job as one of the top guys at Ivanhoe Mines with Robert Friedland. So I've seen a lot, and by comparison, Quebec is really ranked toward the top. It's the second largest Canadian gold producing province. 35% of 2019 production came out of Quebec. Relatively speaking, lower cost exploration and tax incentives that allow us to get back 37 cents on every dollar we put in the ground. I think that it's an incredibly powerful statement to make, given that they actually help promote exploration in Quebec, which is very, very unique. Next, please. The partnership with Agnico, you can see the photograph here with Fred and Olivier Audeny-Vaillancourt, who's one of the top exploration gurus within the Agnico world. The partnership came together last year, actually, over the summer. And we had a number of different companies looking at us, and we picked Agnico to be our partner because they represented a unique position within Quebec and Canada and globally as a gold producer. So we're leveraging a lot of their wisdom and expertise and track record in building sizable gold projects right around our neighborhood in Quebec. So they invested around $9 million into us at a nice premium. They contributed their Joutel project, which is their namesake, Agnico Eagle, the Eagle Tell Bell project. They contributed that project, which is about 40 square kilometers. So we have a 400 square total combined land package now. They are carrying the funding, exploration expenditures over the first 4 years. That equates to about $18 million. We're going to be, the general manager of the joint venture is the gentleman, Fred Speidel, on the screen. And we're also looking at some other targets, some VMS targets on the western end together outside the known resource area as it sits at Douay. For contributing both projects to the joint venture, we received an NSR 2% and a $40 million buyout for each in case going forward to give our shareholders up until the point we signed this deal a benefit for their support, which was about our market cap at the time. We signed this on October 8th last year. So we get to leverage their technical expertise and back track record. They have a full engineering firm within Agnico Eagle, and they've been around since 1957 and were looking at us for a number of years before they finally committed to come in and form this joint venture partnership with us. This is a transformational transaction for us, as we say, and going forward on that footing, I think we have incredible upside ahead of us. Next, please. The infrastructure is great. We have, as you can see, past producers and current producers all around us. We're a couple hundred kilometers from Val d'Or, which is about 120 miles. There's a 2-lane highway. There's skilled labor everywhere, and we're right along the hurricane break. And there's a lot of different. I'll let Fred go into in a minute why we're so excited about this, but we're right where you kind of want to be geographically and geologically. If you look at the history of the Douay project, I got involved in 2017 in May, and we changed and rebranded the company. The first bulk tonnage was outlined in 2004, actually, 13 years prior to that. And the first discovery was made in 1976 when I was just 5 years old. Now, when I came in, I brought a different kind of large company thinking to this company, coming from Ivanhoe Mines, and I started to transition with the team a lot of the software and the personnel, bring a lot of the IP and strategic thinking in-house. Brought on Fred Speidel with help of a former partner of mine, David Broughton, whose picture you can see in the bottom left. He's a very well-known geologist, award-winning Lindsay Thayer geologist who's responsible for most of the ounces in the Ivanhoe Mines world. And he really convinced me that this project was worth taking on nearly 4 years ago. So we re-logged a lot of the historical core. We updated the 3D geologic model. We built a camp. A lot of these costs are now obviously in the rearview mirror. And then we did something to your question earlier, John. We took the resource estimate from Micon and we switched to RPA. What that did is that we gave up a couple ounces, but we got incredibly more credibility on a resource package. But we also, what we haven't included in that, a lot of the drilling and the meters from last two seat programs and what will be included with this upcoming program. So there's about 20,000 meters yet of additional drilling to go into that resource estimate, which we'll be putting out the second half of this year. So these are the things we've been doing, just kind of changing really this company to be what we think it is all along, a mid-tier or larger potentially company with an incredible gold account. Next, please. My background, as I mentioned, is from the Ivanhoe Mines world. I've been in the mining space for since 2005, 15 years or so. Our CFO comes from Deloitte. Fred Speidel's 30 years in exploration, 26 years at Inmet, First Quantum, et cetera. So he has quite a formidable track record. I mentioned Dave Broughton. Jonas also has 12 years in capital markets experience in the mining space. Gerald Riverain, a director, worked with Fred, quite a well-known geologist. Maurice Tagami, VP operations for Wheaton Precious Metals. Michelle Roth works out of New York, actually, who John, I think, may even know. Runs her own firm. She's a recent addition to our board, and I'm incredibly happy to have her. Sean Charland is a capital markets a banker that brought me in originally. And of course, Agizio Bianchini just took on the Stiefel GMP role as a vice chairman, formerly with running in the same job at BMO. So we have, I think, a very deep bench of experienced people that really have done this before. So I think with that, it gives you a sense as to what we've been, what we're doing, what we've been up to, and how we've been changing the tenor and the tone and the direction of this company to really build something really big and very important for Canada and for the gold space. Next page. I think this is over to you, Fred.
That's right. So what we have here is the distribution of the resource blocks for the Douay system as a whole. So that's a very large system, 6 kilometers end to end, a little bit under 2 kilometers wide from one end to the other. You can see the conceptual pits in gray. In blue, we have the inferred blocks. In green, we have the indicated blocks. You can see that the indicated are mostly concentrated at Douay West, where the density of drilling is greater. And there's also some indicated blocks at Porphyry Zone as well. The other thing you can notice here is that mineralization extends well beyond the current conceptual pits, and you can see things like Porphyry, for instance, that are likely to link up with the Nika Zone. Geologically speaking, probably also from a conceptual pit perspective as we do additional work in that area. Nika, by the way, was discovered in 2018, was not part of the prior resources. And recent drilling has also expanded the 531 zone significantly. So there's a fair amount of work that we are currently doing to link up a number of these zones where there's drilling gaps. So just in terms of numbers, so pit constrained resources indicated is about 422,000 ounces, average grade 1.52. Again, that's mostly in Douay West at the western end of the system. Inferred, we have a little over 2 million ounces, average grade of 0.97. Much of that is in porphyry, but obviously also found in the other zones. An initial underground mineral resource, 307,000 ounces, average grade 1.75. That looks small, basically has to do with the fact that there is, at this point, relatively little drilling below about 350 meters vertical depth. So this was really just the first pass to see what kind of average grades we might end up with in that area. And obviously further drilling will focus on higher grade zones, higher grade feeder zones to this system as a whole. So overall, we're looking at just under 2.8 million ounces. As Matthew mentioned, some ounces were lost as a result of going to more conservative parameters, including the steepness of the pits, how far projected from the nearest hole, and that sort of thing. So this is a much more conservative estimate than what we had previously, and kind of in line with moving towards a more advanced stage of project, PEA and so on. This next slide here shows the distribution of near resource targets. So what we're seeing here is a simplified geology. In orange is the Taibbi group sediments. That's juxtaposed against significantly older mafic volcanics in green. There's a major shear zone or structural discontinuity there. Those two groups are actually 25 million years apart. So there's a major break there. And what I'm also showing here, which is of interest, is in pink, the distribution of the cyanide intrusive rocks. That's important because the distribution of gold is in part associated with structure, but in part also associated with proximity to that intrusive complex. So we can see that the conceptual pits either overlap with the cyanide bodies or are fairly close to where these bodies occur. We have these red squares. Those correspond to areas where we have no drilling, and there's significant exploration targets. Between Central Zone and Northwest Zone, for instance, we just completed a geophysical survey, which will give us additional and more defined, if you wish, drill targets for the next couple programs. Then we have a series of ellipses between the known zones, so between Douay West Zone and Northwest Zone, also between Douay West and Porphyry and so on, basically continuing to work at linking up these apparently somewhat isolated zones with each other. And there's geological support for doing that. Just briefly, metallurgical results.
Can I just interject a question?
Sure.
Cyanidic, S-Y-E-N-I-T-I-C, is a new word for me. When I first heard you, before I looked at the wording of the slide, I thought you were referring to C-Y-A-N, cyanide.
Yeah. No.
So what is a cyanidic intrusive versus other intrusives?
Yeah, basically, if you think of a granite and take out all the quartz, you pretty well have cyanide. The implication of cyanide, though, is that in terms of composition, it's what we call alkaline. And beyond that, we don't just have cyanide, we also have carbonatite. That's a really weird intrusive rock that basically requires very deep mantle tapping structures to come up. So the implication of
chemically, gold might come out of solution when the pH changes.
That's a possibility. The other possibility is that we're actually looking at oxidation, so that these cyanides, they're fairly iron rich, highly oxidizing, and when the fluids then hit the reduced sediments or reduced environments within the volcanics, or hit other zones with high iron content, then there's a destabilization of the chemistry and the gold gets precipitated. But we believe that the cyanide, the intrusive complex per se, is not just spatially associated with gold mineralization, but actually has a genetic link. So structure and cyanide are very important components in terms of why this deposit is where it is.
And then your fault trend in ore bodies at Douay are at the contact of the brown sediments and the green volcanics or basalts. So the significance of sediment versus volcanics is the contact and the plumbing.
Yes, that's correct. And it's important to consider too that we're not talking about a continuous sequence of deposition. Rather, there's 25 million years between the basalts to the south and the sediments to the north. So you really have to envision a fault-bounded basin that's developing at the same time as the cyanides are being emplaced. So these sediments, they're actually quite favorable, especially near this major shear zone for gold mineralization, because we have the Vesa deposit that's about 12 kilometers further to the east that's hosted in these sediments. And furthermore, this contact between the Taibbi sediments and the Cartwright Hill basalts, that contact not only hosts Vesa that I just mentioned, Douay that we're talking about here, Estrades, which is a gold-rich VMS about 12 kilometers to the west, but also the Casa Berardi deposit, which is about 40 kilometers further west. So this entire structural and geological context is very, very favorable for more than one style of gold mineralization, because Douay is quite different from Casa Berardi. Casa Berardi and Vesa are more similar, and we're talking about intrusive related gold-rich VMSs and orogenic gold systems. So basically all of the major styles of gold mineralization that we have along the Casa Berardi deformation zone, which is here quite a bit broader than it is normally, they're all present on the Douay property. So hence the rather large range of targets that we have to test going forward. So the next two images, you're welcome, are going to be a section through the western part of the porphyry zone, which we consider to be more or less the central part of the system. And then we have a long section that's going to go more or less along this Casa Berardi North fault in an area that we tested in winter 2020. So the left side is through the central part of the system. All this pink is cyanide, so this quartz poor intrusion. We have the longest intercept of continuous mineralization probably anywhere on the property, so that's 1.2 grams per ton gold over 163.5 meters. Note the outline of this brown thin line here is the conceptual pit per the RPA 2019 resource estimation. Note that this continuous mineralization zone extends well beyond, so that's to the north, on the north side of the current conceptual pit. And so we did some drilling in 2020, in part to test how far mineralization would actually go on the north side of this area, because it was not clear what the limit of mineralization was. So in one of these holes, we got 1.9 grams per ton gold, so significantly higher than deposit average grade over 17 meters. And that same hole, at the end of the hole, ended up in 1.06 grams per ton gold over 7 meters. So that means that the northern limit of the system is not defined, and essentially this entire interval here, because of that on this section, you can see that all the other holes end before they actually test this area. So we need a little bit more drilling here, and we'll probably end up shifting this northern boundary of the conceptual pit further to the north. So that's interesting. The other thing that's interesting is that here we have one of these blocks of indicated that I mentioned before in yellow. It's relatively small, and the reason why it's small is that one of the requirements for indicated resources has to be that the intercepts, the spacing of the drill holes that include the intercepts that go into the indicated resource have to be less than 50 meters. And if you take out the 2020 holes that we have here, like this one there and a few others, the spacing between these holes was all greater than 50 meters. So it was not possible to extend the indicated further than these couple holes in this area. But as we close the drill spacing, you can see that the mineralization is quite consistent from base of overburden, this interval here is overburden, to the base of pit. So you would expect, as we close the drill hole spacing down, that the indicated resource would grow fairly quickly and extend from base of overburden right to the base of pit. So that was all quite encouraging, and we actually, in both fall and winter programs, we are doing additional drill holes in this area, in part to, again, try to better determine where the northern limit of the system is in this area. This other figure, we jump to the northwestern limit of the system. So we had this historical hole that gave 3.2 grams per ton gold over 8.9 meters, right at the base of overburden. So that's of interest because near surface higher than deposit average grade constitute what we call our starter pit search space. And basically, in the early years, you want to have higher grades so that you recover your investment and get a reasonable payback of 3-4 years or less. So anyway, we drilled this hole here, about 100 meters offset relative to the historical hole, just to see how far this zone would go. And we confirm mineralization, 4.2 grams per ton gold over 3.4 meters. Followed by 1.15 over 20. So a thicker intercept than what we had in the original historical hole. And there's no drilling for a 200 meter interval to the west. There's no drilling 150 meters. There's a 150 meter gap between the historical hole and the next drill hole. And there's also gaps to the north and to the south. So not surprisingly, in this particular area, where we have near surface higher than deposit average grade, we will be doing another 5 or so relatively short drill holes. Note the scale, 50 meters. So 150 meter drill hole here, front and back and along this trend here, will give us a pretty good first impression of what the volume potentially actually is for this near surface higher grade material that wasn't really being considered previously until we got this intercept to show us what the potential of this area was. So now looking at depth potential, like the 2.8 million ounces or a little bit less, 2.5 million ounces is in pit. We only have about 300,000 ounces underground, which I mentioned previously. And actually the total volume of the blocks that you see here is more than double that. And the reason for that is because the underground resources are only considered if they fit within mining shapes. So the mining shapes are not shown on here, but a number of these blocks are not part of mining shapes, therefore they're not contemplated. The other thing that's important to consider is you can see how these mineralized zones kind of break off in an unnatural, non-geological way. So that's because they haven't pinched out. It's just because there's not enough drilling in these areas to actually be able to define what the ultimate continuity of this system is. And you know that in the Abitibi, vertical continuity of these systems is often in excess of 1.5 kilometers or 1,500 meters down to 2,000 meters. And here we're really talking about about 900 meters total for this entire figure. And in reality, most of the drill holes that we have put in here are less than 500 meters. So it's just that additional drilling is needed, but we basically will be focusing on the near surface open pit material with some deeper holes just to continue demonstrating proof of concept as we've already done in the 531 zone here in 2019 and 2020.
Fred, does
Yeah.
the continuity stay the same, improve, or weaken as you deepen?
I think what we expect to see here and what we are starting to see with some of the deeper holes that we drilled is that higher grades and somewhat narrower intercepts are a reflection of what we call feeder zones. So basically, in this transition from a geological perspective, porphyry to Nika is where the center of the system is. But we get some of these zones that are hosted in mafic volcanics that are more structurally controlled, so the gold's been more focused. And so these things here have really good potential for just higher grade over, still significant intervals. Same is true for Douay West and Nika area. So in a general sense, what usually you expect with these kinds of systems is broader near surface with broader low grade envelopes, and that things narrow somewhat to depth and the grades increase also to depth. But as I say,
When I look at your 6 arrows in slide 12, we shouldn't hope that infill drilling provides continuity for solid gold in between all these different arrows.
Oh, for sure. Like, we're quite confident, and actually the RPA 2019 report indicated that they believe that there's easily 0.5 to 1.5 additional million ounces below the areas that we've currently drilled, but not even considering what might be there between, say, 900 or even 800 meters vertically to 1,500 meters vertically, because
there's going to be in narrow feeder structures.
Yeah, well,
there's more gold, but it isn't going to be solid gold.
Yeah, I think so. When I say narrow, it's relatively speaking. Like, you can see the porphyry zone, we're talking about, several kilometers length in that. So eventually there will be a focus to this system, like where the center actually is. But I'm not saying narrow a couple meters. I'm just saying, relatively speaking, narrower than what we see currently.
Narrower than 2 meters, 2 kilometers.
Space. Yeah, that's right.
Thank you.
Okay, now just talk briefly about the Joutal project, which is now part of our playground, I guess. So it's 39 square kilometers. It's contiguous with Maple Gold's Douay project. Initial discoveries in the area around 1962. Speidel was put in production in 1974, price of gold $80. And exploitation ended in 1993, 1994, when the gold price was $360 an ounce. So as a result, the cutoff, which is the grade above which you send the rock to the mill, was 6 grams per ton. So that means that they were, in a sense, because of the price of gold at the time, they were high grading the system and left behind a lot of the, medium to lower grade material. And I'll show you that in a moment in the long section. Nowadays, of course, even for an underground mine, you would lose significantly lower cutoff grades, which allows you to mine larger volumes. And the other thing to consider is that the average grade, production grade at Joutal was 6.5 grams per ton gold, total of 1.2 million ounces roughly. And that 6.5 grade is actually a diluted grade. They had ground control challenges, and rather than dealing with them, they just accepted at the time that they were going to have around 30% dilution. So when you look at the reserve estimation that were done at the time, the average grade there was actually closer to 10 to 12 grams per ton. So that's very significant in terms of, finding another part of this, or even just remaining resources around the existing stopes can have a pretty significant impact on Douay. So I'm showing that here. We'll just focus on the lower figure. So the lower is a long section along the plate mineralization, and orange is lower gold grade, red is higher gold grade. You can see that the top 500 meters or so have not been exploited. In gray is the mined out zones, darker gray or black, they're the permanent pillars. So again, top 500 has been drilled to some extent, not mined, and the lower material has also not been mined where there's no gray, and you can see that drilling has been done down to about 1,300 meters from surface, and you still have these red zones that are open with no drilling. So we're quite confident that we will be able to define a significant resource both in the upper part and in the lower part, like above the previous production and below the previous production. And we're currently compiling hard copy data. So there's about 650 drill holes at surface and about 6,500 drill holes that were drilled from underground. And with all that information, plus a geophysical survey that we're currently running on the eastern continuation of the system, we'll have a pretty good database for targeting for the future. This then focuses back on, we were just talking about this area in here, Speidel deposit. We're doing our geophysical survey over this target here, which is JDZ West. Some pretty good results coming out of that at this point in time. We just completed a geophysical survey over JDZ East, as well as a survey over the north flank of the system here. So a series of targets, northeast IP targets, very important in the sense that it's a bit more advanced. We did geophysics there 2019, 2020. I drilled 2 initial holes late last fall. We're very encouraged by what we saw there. A pretty big sulfide system with gold, silver, and other elements. We just press released that a few days ago. And so we brought in a second drill, drilled 2 more holes. So we've got 4 done so far, where assays are pending for the second batch of 2 holes. And we have 3 more sites that are permitted here as well. This south IP target is larger than a northeast IP target. The northern one was deemed higher priority because there was no historical drilling there, whereas the south IP target had some historical drilling. But you got to keep in mind that Viz is only 400 meters long, and this target here, we're looking at probably I don't know, 4 or 5 kilometers. So there's space for lots of vasers in here, and these geophysical anomalies are actually open in this area, so we need to do a bit more work there to expand them to the full extent. This target here, P8, we have 1 initial hole in there, 2 more sites are permitted. Similar system to Douay West and 531 zone, which are higher grade at Douay, but there's also some geological and geophysical similarities with Tel Bel. So I won't go into the details there, but it's a pretty big target with some pretty good potential. Series of other targets that I won't go into detail either. Did want to mention though the VMS target, so that's copper zinc, these black bodies here, and that's based on 2018 mapping, no follow-up since then. In 2018, we also did a top of bedrock drilling program. This is the interpreted eastern continuation of the Estratus horizon, so that northernmost red blob there is probably sitting on that horizon. And we have another target just to the south here, so that also has not had any follow-up. So basically what we're going to do is do an airborne geophysical survey, so EM and MAG over the western half of the property, because these targets are pretty long and we're not going to start scout drilling there. We're going to use the airborne geophysics to zoom in on areas of greater interest. Northeast IP kind of talked about that already. So basically the blue dots are the ones that we have permitted that are pending to be drilled. The other dots we have already drilled. We released the results for the first 2 holes that are only 160 meters apart. We're waiting for the other 2 holes, and by the time we get that, we'll have results for about 1.1, a little bit more than 1 kilometer. That'll help us vector towards higher gold grades. You can see that the south IP target is open to the east, open to the west. Still need to close that off. This we kind of talked about before, just focusing on the size of the P8 target here, quite significant. So more drilling to be done on all of these targets. This is just to show what the distribution of drill holes was for the fall 2020 drill campaign. So again, the northeast IP target, 4 holes drilled there. Exploration holes, 287 is basically testing the western continuation of the main zone. A series of holes within the resources. This was the first hole that we drilled at the P8 target. And yeah, so fairly broadly distributed. This is a press release that we put out a few days ago, just showing the initial results for these 2 holes in the northeast IP target on top of a high resolution airborne mag survey that we did at the end of last year. So you can see the structural patterns, not unlike the patterns we have in the Douay area, some of the intercepts we got, some pretty good grades, relatively narrow still. But again, like I said before, we tested 160 meters over this entire roughly 2 kilometer strike length anomaly. So the yellow squares are holes that we are planning to drill. These guys here are the holes for which the assays are pending. Again, won't go into the details, but if you just in terms of geological and geochemical characteristics, northeast IP is very similar to Vesa, both sediment hosted. Vesa has an average rate of 5.9 grams per ton gold. At Northeast IP, we don't know yet. Comparing that with Dewey, we can see that the geochemistry and other geological aspects are rather different. So it's kind of part of.
Just to help the audience, Vesa was mined by Agnico Eagle in the late 70s or early 1980s.
No, Vesa was last mined by a local contractor, and they finished mining that in the middle of last year. So you might be thinking of Eagle Tellbell, the Eagle Tellbell system, which is different.
Vesa was a producing mine for Agnico Eagle in the early phases of my career, at the same time as Jutel Tellbell. And I want to say it was around a 25,000 ounce mine. For the local contractor, how big was it?
Yeah, the ultimate resource ended up being something like just under 500,000 ounces. It's not really published, but I did do a mine visit and asked them about that. So they mined it from pretty close to surface down to about 700 meters depth. But we have to keep in mind that the last phase of mining was really a depth recovery exercise. So there's no attempt to explore to define new resources. You know, basically they were high grading the system to recover their depth, and that was that. So it's important.
The target is to depth or laterally too?
Sorry?
Is the target below 700 meters or along strike at the shallower areas?
Basically, you're getting mineralization that's starting pretty close to surface, extending to at least 750 meters depth. Not a lot of, like this is at Vesa, not a lot of drilling done below that depth. At Northeast IP, we're getting sulfide mineralization, like significant sulfide mineralization right from the base of overburden. So these intercepts that we're showing here, 2.5 grams per ton gold over 1 meter, that's at about 60 meters depth. So essentially what we're saying, based on the geophysics and based on the drilling information we have so far, that mineralization could be anywhere from base of overburden right down to 700 meters or more. We're currently drilling holes that are about 400, 450 meters long. And depending on where the center of gravity of the system ends up being, then we'll adjust accordingly. But basically, we're still looking at this from an open pit perspective initially.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Just quickly, we talked about before about this IP grid that we were doing to cover the area between the central zone and the northwest zone, where I showed you that long section. These green bars are all areas that have greater than 0.45 grams per ton gold, which is the reporting cutoff we've used for the 2019 resource estimation. The background here is magnetics, and you can see the pattern that's fairly typical for the resource area. This pattern here is rather distinctive and reflects sediments in this blue area, and basalts and cyanides in this more higher relief zone. An interesting point here is we have probably the richest top of bedrock drill hole that gave 256 gold grains in the basal sediment, so that's the glacial sediment. And because those grains were delicate, it means that the source area is probably something like 500 meters to the northwest, no more. We have a series of artificial intelligence targets from a study that we did in late 2020, and those targets have yet to be drill tested. So we'll see. We're currently compiling these results here, and we'll see what additional targets we can come up with for drill testing going forward. But we have similar sized grids. They're pretty big. Further to the south, near where the PA target is, and another grid that I just mentioned a moment ago at Jutel.
So I want to make sure I understand this, Fred. Hole 76955 means it's a drill hole. 256 gold grains means like a grain of sand or a grain of sugar. It's crushed gold.
I should explain that. So when I say top of bedrock drilling, what those drill rigs do is they go through the glacial cover. They actually sample the basal portion of the glacial cover. They go into bedrock, but only a few meters. So then what you do is geochemical analysis of the sediment samples that you took, the glacial cover, the dirt, if you wish, that has gold in it. And you also do geochemistry on the bedrock. So when I'm saying 256 gold grains, those are gold grains that were accumulated in the basal till, and they were abraded, eroded, and transported by the advance of the glaciers, which was from northwest to southeast. So that's where
the basal till sample, 1 ton, 50 tons. Does this suggest 1 gram per ton, 1 ppm anomaly, 10 ppms? how can we understand this a little better?
Yeah, so basically the sample size would be a few kilograms because we're talking about reverse circulation, drill hole that's maybe 10 centimeters or so across roughly, and the sample is probably 1 to 2 meters. So it's measured in kilograms. These gold grains, they're visually examined with the microscope because it's relevant what the shape of those grains is with regard to how far you have to look for the source. They also do an analysis of that, and the analysis of that, I don't remember exactly, but would have been somewhere in the range of 5 to 10 grams per ton. And that also had anomalous arsenic associated with it. But basically the focus here is to determine where do we have significant amounts of gold grains in these drill holes and what the source of this might be. Because the thing is, when you do an assay, a coarse gold grain will obviously have a pretty big impact. You know, and it's equally relevant to know how many gold grains you have and how delicate they are in terms of how far up ice do you go for the source. So what we're saying here again is that given that 240 of the 256 gold grains were delicate, they were not abraded, they were not rounded, then you only go about 500 meters up ice for the source area. That's in this neck of the woods, which is pretty close to this shear zone that we were talking about before between the SEDS to the north and the volcanics to the south. Does that answer your
Simply put, 25 to 50 gold grains is 1 gram per ton.
Depends on the size of the gold grains. It's not, what they do is they actually measure the size of the gold grains. They estimate what the assay should be, and then they do the assay. And if there's any surprises, sometimes the nuggets aren't fully diluted, that sort of thing. So yeah, they're different grain sizes. It's not.
I'm concerned that the listener thinks you have a 3 kilogram sample or 3% gold or something like that.
No.
That's what I'm trying to clarify.
No, we're talking ppms in that range. But yeah,
and
some of the
1 ppm is 1 gram per ton for people on the call that are not technical.
That's correct. Yeah. This is just the distribution of the 2021 drill holes so far. So that's the red dots. We've just completed drilling a hole in Dewey West where we haven't drilled for some time. And we're now drilling at the 531 zone. 531 zone is a particular interest because in 2019, we got 2 very significant intercepts that are among the top 3 ever on the property. So the blue dots are the sites that we're currently in the process of permitting, and we should be carrying on drilling the blue dots shortly. And you can also see that in Northeast IP target, we have additional blue dots for drilling. And Matthew, you want to take over from here?
Yeah, happy to. Thank you, Fred. So what to look out for in the first half and the second half this year? Fred's gone through what we're undertaking now in the drill program. It's going to be north of 10,000 meters of additional drilling. It started already with Agnico as our partner last month, actually in January. The drill results from last fall are going to continue to come out. We put a press release out last week with some of the initial findings to show that the sulfide system that we've encountered, we think is very, very interesting, very relevant, and very exciting for us. And with the additional rigs that we put there and the drills that we put down and the assays at their labs coming back, we'll be planning to present those to the market in due course. As you know, there's a geophysics program which is being run right now. We're going to release a new geologic 3D digital model for Joutel. That's based on the digitization of all this historic work. So if you think about what that project had, it was a huge room filled with boxes of analog data that we're transforming into digital form to put into Leapfrog and put out in a model so people really see what they mined, what they didn't mine, what they left behind, what the project potential could be, and what we're going after and why. So I think that's going to be quite a fun thing to talk about with everyone, so everyone gets to understand critically what we have in store for us at that project. We're commencing the VTEM mag projects that cover the VMS targets that we're doing jointly with Agnico. We're spending each $250,000 on that effort. And then moving into the second half of 2021, as we we'll have the results from this program, the 12,000 meters that we're drilling now, resource optimization 3D model. We'll do an updated resource estimate that will include the 20,000 meters or so of drilling that's not yet in our resource estimate. We'll announce the completion of the IP work at the VTEM, the VMS targets to the west, and then we'll talk about the drilling program with Agnico that'll follow up on the best targets and really give a direction as to what we're going after here. I mean, what we talked about before this call started, John, a little bit was, what's our focus? And I think our focus is to expand what we have in front of us, which is a profoundly important two projects. We have the Douay project and the Joutel project, both of which have merit. And we're incredibly gifted and happy that we have 3 million ounces that we know, plus what we think additionally holds is in the Joutel project area. So we're focused on growing those resources, as well as finding discoveries, significant discoveries like the Northeast IP and the others that Fred spoke about outside the known resource area. So those are our two main focuses going forward, and I think that's why we're as excited as ever to be in the position we're in with the most incredible partner on planet Earth for us. Can you go to the next slide, please? Here's an important slide too that shows what our market cap is and our capital situation. Our cash position, as I said, is around 20 million with cash, $18 million with funding from Agnico. The joint venture is taking over a lot of the hard costs that we were paying for up until this point. So for the next 4 years, we're carried on the exploration side. Gives us a lot of flexibility with our balance sheet to look at other opportunities, even outside this joint venture. And we are doing that. We have a number of incredibly, we think, accretive transactions that are possible. And at the right time, when the market deems fit, we'll pull a trigger and grow our platform and leverage what we've put together with Agnico at the Douay Joutel project. As you can see, our institutional ownership includes Agnico, of course, Fidelity, and others. And over time, our mission, my mission, was always to do a couple of things. One is to bring in an incredibly strong partner. That's something I've done in my career with other mining projects in the Ivanhoe Mines world. We've checked that box. The other thing is to bring in, change the retail ownership to include more balanced weighting between retail and institutional ownership. We've done that, as you can see from our chart there, from our graph. And so I think we're incredible footing, as I said, to really grow the platform, the projects with the people and the partners we have in place with the capital we need to do all those things. So I think that's the end of the formal presentation. Fred, if you'd go to the next one, this just recounts some things we've said just now, and you can leave it on the slide. So if people are wondering, what we have to look forward to in any gold price environment, here are the things that really gonna make this thing work, and this project and this company. I mean, why own Maple Gold? I mean, we have all these things going for us. Everything is growing. We believe in the project area. And we have a number of opportunities out there in the market that will enable us to leap forward in size of the company in relatively short order. So I think those are some of the points that we should end the conference or our presentation with, and turn it over to you, John, for any questions you may have.
Thank you, and I enjoyed all the explanation. The Agnico transaction was the first transaction where they bought 12% of your stock. And then a second transaction where they injected 18 million more, and they earned half of your Douay project and your exploration ground, and you earned half of their Joutel past producing mine, 1.15 million ounce past production, and their exploration ground. So sort of for 14 million, you sold half your company, but your stock, US 14 million, but your stock has gone up because there's no risk of future dilution, future funding. You have 60 million lined up and all the technical support of Agnico Eagle. that a fair summary?
It's almost right. I mean, they came in last August when we did a small financing when the gold tape was going crazy. We were in the middle of intense negotiations with them and others, and they wanted to put in money before we'd signed anything binding even with them. They followed that with a strategic investment when we were trading at 17 cents Canadian, and to invest their next tranche to get them to 12.8%. That got them to, that was about 8 million or so. And with warrants that allow them to buy in at 34 cents. The reason we did this was not just for the cash. I mean, that's a nice component of this, but this project has been around for quite some time, and it's never had the likes of Agnico or anybody close to their size or importance. Putting what we call, their seal of approval, so to speak, on the potential that we have here. And I think that, coupled with the fact that we have this past producing Joutel project, was really, we think it is growing the company in incredible ways. And that's why the share price is appreciated, because now we have the capital, we have another project just to the south of our border. And going forward, growing both these projects with Agnico gives us the ability to really expand everything. So yes, almost, that's a fair characterization, but really it's, 1 + 1 = 16 in my mind, where we have a project. We would have not structured this way had it just been a strategic investment. It's because of our belief in the potential of Joutel that we allowed the structure to be the way it is, because the combination of the two is so powerful. As you know, John, the best place to build a new mine is in the shadow of a head frame. And with Joutel, we have the underground workings are all in place. And as you saw from Fred's presentation, there's a lot of untapped potential there. And since they left that project when gold is $360 an ounce or so, I can't go into things specifically, but you can imagine why it is that we are so ebullient and excited about what that project has to offer. So it's the combination of all those things, which I think will cause us to go to much, much higher heights in our estimation on a valuation of the company standpoint. I mean, think about our enterprise value right now. It's still incredibly an attractive speculation, since if you look at our cash at $60 million with the warrants and our market cap in Canadian dollars, it's around $100 million or so, we're getting, $40-50 million for roughly half of 2 projects and 3 million ounces in Quebec, Canada. So it's an astoundingly, we think, attractive speculation given where we are now, what we have to offer, and our partnership we've established with Agnico.
Agnico has a vetting process through their organization, their technical office in Cadillac, various executives. They don't list Joutel as inferred, indicated, or measured resources at their reserve and resource statement they posted last Thursday night. They didn't, even though they had already, I guess they haven't earned into Douay because they have to spend the whole 18 million Canadian. They've spent some of it. So they're not listing 1.4 million ounces from Douay yet. And they didn't list pro forma 3.5 million ounces of reserves at Hope Bay and 3.8 million ounces of resources. They have a vetting process. What documentation do you think Douay and Joutel need for next year Agnico to admit that there's gold in the context of their resource table?
You'd have to ask them. I don't know what process they go through exactly, but I think this is a matter of things just coming together with us and them just probably not having time to update everything, I assume. But as we do the next resource estimate update with them, I think those things will change.
And it would appear from your discussion that the gold known at Joutel is hundreds of thousands of ounces, if not more.
It's hard to say that at the
Yeah,
present
go
point in time, there is not a 43-101 compliant resource. There has been some work that was done late at the time that the mine was being wrapped up. So we're talking, 1974-ish. So obviously anything that was done at the time is not 43-101 compliant. We're going to need to do additional drilling there. And of course, the data compilation that's currently underway will help us define targets, will help us define more or less what's there. And I think in the near future, we should be able to at least visually show where the resource areas are, even if it's not yet 43-101 compliant. So there's a bit of work to be done before we get to that stage at Joutel.
Thank you. Once again, we're happy to have questions from the people on the call.
Yeah, one thing to keep in mind, as Fred mentioned, these are early days. We're building something big and beautiful, we think, and this is not a one season program company. This is something that you build over time, over a couple of years, and then you come out and you have something that's big, important. And as Fred mentioned at the beginning, Agnico listen to their geologist, and they only go into projects with 5 million ounce plus potential. The vetting process you mentioned, John, was extensive with them, even to get to the point where they did a deal with us. It was a number of years and many site visits and poring over all the core that we have. You can count, how many projects or they've invested in outside their own company versus other, Eric Sprott and other people that take, wide view. They're very critically specific on what they go into and why. And so that's something that I think that the audience could gain some comfort from, knowing that their diligence has been done by Agnico to a great extent. They should do their own market diligence, of course, but this is not something that happened where the conversation began with Agnico last spring and we signed something in the summer. It was that plus 28 months of additional work and interaction with them.
So there are investments they've made, such as Gold Eagle Mines that had the dubious Cochinor deposit that maybe is a $2 billion train wreck. They sold that to Goldcorp. There's a project in Brazil that they took a loss on. I'm forgetting the name of the public company. Changed its name a couple of times. Then there's other things they buy out. So if they were looking to do a quick flip on you, they might give you notoriety and talk about you. But if they want to buy out 100%, they might be more silent. So it's good for you that they're quiet. I'm just trying to put it in a market context for you.
Yeah, that's true. I don't disagree with any of those
They sometimes take a board seat and own 10, 20% of a company and work with them for a year or two. It's a courting process, getting to know you better.
Yep.
This is more advanced because it's a 50-50 JV doing the work on the ground, combining adjacent properties.
Yeah, I have to add or finish with maybe, I cannot say enough good things about the team at Agnico. They're all gentlemen, very honorable characters, love the culture there. And I think Fred would acknowledge that they've been, just a joy to work with. And I think it's going to be a wonderful partnership going forward.
Well, super. So there's no questions from the people on the call. I'm sure they're trying to digest all these different targets and potential mineralizations. So what is the metallurgy of Douay? Would it fit in the Malartic mill someday, or do you think it's its own similar mill?
I think there's a definite probability that a conventional process will work. Like essentially the amount of metallurgical work that's been done so far is limited, but it has used mineralization from each one of the zones. It has assessed the impact of different grind sizes, the impact of different grades, the impact of different zones, and the general conclusion seems to be that a recovery in the high 80s, low 90s is possible. There's a fair amount of free gold where we have done gold deportment, so it's not complicated, it's not encapsulated, there's no deleterious elements, and grind size does not appear to be critical. There's a fair amount of gold that's recoverable through gravity, about 26%. And yeah, in terms of hardness test, there's been a little bit of work done, and obviously, as you would expect, the basalts softer than the cyanides. The cyanides are a little bit harder than average, but you know, we do have a blend of soft cements, soft basalts, and harder cyanides. And from an acid generation perspective, there's a lot of carbonate throughout the different types of rocks, so there's pretty good neutralization potential. And in any case, the sulfide content is quite low on average compared to other systems in the Abitibi. So I think so far metallurgy looks pretty good.
So if it's 26% free gold, it could be a candidate for Goldex-like processing where there's a lot of free gold.
Yeah, I think a lot of these conventional processes do have gravity recovery of some of the gold, and then after that they go to flotation. And in a general sense, what the studies have concluded so far is that the typical grind works, and leaching of, well, obviously the gravity recovery of the coarser gold and subsequently a leaching of the flotation con would probably be the best way to go. Having said that, there's also been bulk leaching exercises, and bulk leaching alone will also recover high 80s. But with bulk leaching, you have other challenges which have to do with, you know, social acceptability. There are deep leach systems in subarctic climates elsewhere, notably in Alaska and in Russia, but none of those have been, you know, put in place in Quebec yet. So that would be could be a challenge. So we're basically looking at it from a point of view of a conventional milling, gravity recovery, and flotation process at this point in time. So starting off with an open pit and subsequently an underground expansion. Kind of like, as you were saying, John, basically the Malartic model.
Super, super. Well, thank you very much. Congratulations. It's good to see that you're prosperous and well-financed and target rich and ready to go hunting.
Thank you, John. It's great talking to you today.
Good, thank you.
all.
Good
Have a
hunting.
great
Thank
day.
you. Thank you.
Bye
Have
for
a
now.
great